Ancient Spartans didn't have gyms, no bench presses, no squat racks, no protein shakes, yet they built bodies so formidable that the mere sight of their army made enemies surrender without fighting. Other Greek city-states literally describe Sparta as being walled by men, meaning their soldiers were so physically dominant they didn't even need defensive walls around their city. And here's what's strange, their training methods were nothing like what you'd expect. In fact, much of what we think we know about Spartan training is completely wrong. So how did they do it? Here's the thing most people don't understand about Spartans. They weren't trying to build the best-looking bodies. They were building warrior bodies, physiques designed for one purpose, surviving combat and outlasting every other soldier on the battlefield. While other Greeks competed in the Olympics to show off aesthetic physiques, Spartans dominated a completely different event, the hoplitodromos. This was a sprint race wearing full battle armor, helmet, shield, and greaves weighing over 50 pounds combined. Imagine sprinting 400 to 800 meters in the scorching Greek sun, carrying the equivalent of a loaded backpack, with 20 other warriors trying to beat you. That was their specialty. Spartans won this event consistently because their entire training system prepared them for exactly this kind of brutal physical demand. They could also march for days without stopping, fight in formation for hours, and survive on minimal food and water. This wasn't bodybuilding. This was building an indestructible war machine. And it all started at age 7 in a training program so harsh it would be considered abuse today, the Agoge. The Agoge wasn't optional. Every Spartan boy, except the sons of kings, entered it at age 7 and didn't graduate until age 30. That's 23 years of continuous military conditioning. But here's what's surprising. The Agoge didn't actually teach weapons training or combat techniques in the early years. Historians have confirmed that Spartan boys weren't drilled with spears or taught sword fighting. Instead, the focus was on building 3 things: pain tolerance, endurance, and absolute obedience to the state. The boys were deliberately deprived of food, forcing them to steal to survive. If they got caught stealing, they were brutally flogged, not for stealing, but for being caught. The lesson? Do whatever it takes to survive, but be smart enough not to get caught. They were given one cloak to wear year-round. In the freezing Spartan winters, they shivered through the cold with no additional clothing. The philosopher Xenophon wrote that this trained their bodies to regulate temperature more effectively. They slept on beds they had to make themselves from reeds they gathered by hand. Breaking them off without using tools toughened their hands. And they trained barefoot year-round, which not only hardened their feet, but also developed superior balance, agility, and proprioception that gave them a massive advantage in combat. But the real physical training? That came in 4 specific areas. Spartans ran, constantly, barefoot, up mountains, in full armor. Historical records describe an exercise called the octonyctia. Octonyctia is a term for the 8-night training exercises that were part of the rigorous Spartan military training. These were grueling, simulated assaults where trainees would practice fighting in full armor, sometimes through darkness, as a form of intense preparation. Young Spartans would march in full armor and equipment for 4 straight nights, resting only during the day. For the first 4 days, they drilled almost continuously with only short rest breaks and half rations. Then for 2 days, no food. And for the final 2 days, no food or water. This wasn't just endurance training, this was teaching the body to function under the worst possible conditions. When you can march for 8 days with minimal food and water, a normal battle becomes manageable. They also practiced weighted running constantly, not just the Olympic hoplitodromos, but daily training runs carrying heavy stones, logs, or wearing armor. This built explosive leg strength, cardiovascular endurance, and mental toughness simultaneously. Modern special forces units like Navy SEALs use similar principles, training under deliberately miserable conditions to prepare for the worst-case scenario. From age 7 onwards, Spartan boys wrestled, daily, against each other in brutal free-for-all competitions where anything short of killing your opponent was allowed. They also practiced pankration, an ancient Greek combat sport that combined wrestling, boxing, kicking, and submissions. Think early MMA, but with fewer rules. Historical sources describe competitions where teams would try to drive each other off an elevated platform by pushing, kicking, biting, and gouging. But they also did simpler movements: running, jumping, stone throwing, and what we'd now call calisthenics. While there's limited direct evidence for specific exercises like push-ups or pull-ups, We know Greek athletes used bodyweight movements extensively. They practiced an exercise called othismos, pushing their shields into trees to build shoulder and leg strength for the pushing battles in phalanx warfare. They threw the discus and javelin, developing explosive rotational power and shoulder strength. They did standing broad jumps while holding weights up to 4 pounds in each hand, swinging them to generate momentum. All of this created balanced, functional development. You can't wrestle effectively with overdeveloped arms and weak legs. You can't throw a javelin with imbalanced shoulders. Athletic function enforced aesthetic balance. But here's something nobody talks about. Spartans danced, with weapons. The Pyrrhic dance was a traditional Greek war dance that simulated combat. Dancers held shields and spears while performing choreographed movements that mimicked battle maneuvers, retreating, advancing, crouching, thrusting, blocking. This served multiple purposes. It built conditioning and agility, it taught weapon familiarity, and it developed the kind of quick, light footwork that's essential for plyometric power. Think of it like shadow boxing combined with plyometric drills, constant movement, staying light on your feet, explosive direction changes, all while managing the weight of armor and weapons. Modern athletes would recognize this as sport-specific conditioning. Spartans were essentially doing high-intensity interval training centuries before we had a name for it. So why were Spartan physiques so impressive without modern training methods? First, volume and consistency. They trained from age 7 until age 60, assuming they lived that long. 53 years of continuous physical conditioning creates extraordinary results regardless of methodology. Second, their training was entirely functional. Every movement served a combat purpose. This created dense practical muscle built through athletic performance rather than isolation exercises. Third, they were genetically selected. Spartans encouraged their strongest men to marry women chosen for physical capability. Multiple generations of this created a population with superior athletic potential. And fourth, and this is crucial, they trained under constant stress. Sleep deprivation, food restriction, temperature extremes, and competitive pressure created adaptation that gym training simply can't replicate. But here's what modern science tells us. The Spartan system wasn't optimal for building maximum muscle mass or strength. It was optimal for building resilient warriors who could endure anything. A modern bodybuilder or powerlifter following a proper program with adequate nutrition would obviously be bigger and stronger than any ancient Spartan. But that Spartan could outlast them in any endurance event, fight effectively for hours, and survive on scraps while marching through mountains. The Spartan perfect physique wasn't about aesthetics. It was about function under the worst possible conditions. Which Spartan training method would you actually try? Weighted running, the Pyrrhic dance, or the pancration? Let me know in the comment section below. Ancient Spartans built legendary bodies without gyms by training for war, not for looks. Constant running, combat sports, weighted carries, and brutal conditioning under deliberately harsh conditions created warriors whose physical capabilities became legendary. You don't need their methods to build an impressive physique, but you can learn from their principle, train for function, and form will follow.